It's just,
Anyway, also the first time.
it's very conducive to deals. Are you okay? Is everyone fine? Margot, if you would, I think you could sit outside and have some food. Would you like to have food, or do you consider that a bribe? And therefore you cannot write honestly, or therefore you have to write a bad story? Okay, because if you'd like, would you like something to eat at this time? Yes or no? You can speak. Yes, sir. Yes? Okay. Margot, yes, sir. Take them outside, tell the chef, serve them a little lunch, okay?
Thank you, press.
Thank you, press. Thank you, press. Thank you, guys. Thank you, guys. Thank you, press. Thank you, press.
That's
Thank you, press. There you go. Thank you.
Proclaimed president of peace, using a season of peace to basically rage tweet during the holiday, going after enemies, going after every political opponent he has, going after foreign countries, and also launching effectively airstrikes on sovereign nations overseas.
It was pretty sad. Consider that he has no one really to spend time with on Christmas. If you're doing that much posting,
I wasn't sure where that was going for a second.
Why does he have that much free time at the holidays? Why is he
I got in trouble. My husband got on to me on Christmas Eve. He's like, stop reading the Epstein files and spend time with your family, which is a very valid point, and I was ashamed.
That's how you spend
Wait, so
Christmas.
are you suggesting that his family was like, here you go, Donald.
They're like, take the
phone and just like leave us alone for a little bit.
I mean, he notoriously stays up like all
Yes.
night long and sleeps like only like 3 hours or so at a time. So I imagine there's a period where like he's got access to his devices and everyone else is sound asleep. And that's when he's able to post like over 100 times on Truth Social. There's nobody to stop him.
I mean, when you think about it just from purely mathematical, 100 posts over the course of 24 hours, you think about it, it's like it is almost like 4 posts an hour for 24 hours straight. I mean, just imagine posting for 24 hours straight, 4 posts every single hour. You got to post through it, exactly. I guess he was snowed in D.C. I don't know what the excuse was.
And Elise,
Well,
you
he's
were
in
not the
Mar-a-Lago.
only one who was apparently spending your Christmas reading the Epstein files. I think we have one of those 100 posts from Trump where he talks about the Epstein files. He says, "Merry Christmas to all, including the many sleazebags who loved Jeffrey Epstein, gave him bundles of money, went to his island, attended his parties, and thought he was the greatest guy on earth, only to drop him like a dog when things got too hot."
That's long. That's a long post, too.
That's just a tiny
That was just a
Right, I know. But exactly. Like, these weren't just short.
Yeah, they're not
140
tweets.
Yeah, exactly. Like, he's got
These are
a
like
lot
short
of-
essays.
Yeah,
But also, I also think it's like always a bit of projection with Trump, right? Like he's talking almost about himself in these posts, right? Like this specific post where he's kind of going after sleazebags. It's as if he doesn't know that there are videos of him literally with Jeffrey Epstein at parties.
Oh no, he knows. He,
So that's what I'm saying. It's
later
like
in that post, he mentions something along the lines of like, "Well, I dropped him first.
Yeah, right,
We were kind of late to the game." But yeah, I mean, this one felt more personal. Every year, he does release some kind of post that's like, "To my haters." and
Yes.
haters."
Yes.
And honestly, I kind of look forward to the post every year because they always make
It's
me
not
laugh.
even every year. I feel like it's
Holiday.
Every holiday.
Like, it's
Merry
Easter.
Christmas
It's like
to my
Christ
haters.
has risen to all the haters.
And I was just going to say really quickly, it's always the time of year where you can count on Donald Trump to ruin one kid's Christmas with like a phone call or somebody who's calling in. I mean, I just want to play this really quickly. I know we're almost out of time, but we got to listen to this. Trump talking with a kid from Pennsylvania about coal. Watch this.
Pennsylvania.
Right, I know. Pennsylvania's great. We won Pennsylvania. Actually 3 times, but we won Pennsylvania. DeSantis is a very good person. We want to make sure that he's not infiltrated, that we're not infiltrating into our country a bad Santa. What would you like Santa to bring?
Not cool.
Not coal. No, you don't want coal. Well, coal is, you mean clean, beautiful coal.
It wouldn't be a holiday without an awkward Trump phone call with a kid in this country.
While he's sitting on like a gold throne,
Yes, exactly.
looking like Scrooge.
Anyway, we're going to have to leave it at that. We do want to get to our top story tonight, and it's part of what Donald Trump was doing over the holiday. An extremely busy foreign policy week for Donald Trump ahead. You got tomorrow, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. He's going to meet with Trump at his Mar-a-Lago estate. This is on the schedule while Russia just launched a barrage of rockets towards Ukraine. Then on Monday, Trump is expected to meet with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who, reminder, has an arrest warrant out from the International Criminal Court. But those meetings aren't even the most striking developments for Trump this week. On Christmas Day, Trump announced on Truth Social that the U.S. carried out strikes against ISIS targets in Nigeria. He claimed it was to defend innocent Christians there. On Christmas Eve, Netanyahu, Israel's prime minister and Trump's close ally, posted this video.
Israel, the only country in the Middle East where the Christian community is thriving. Israel is the only country in the Middle East where Christians can practice their faith with full rights and in total freedom, where Christian pilgrims are embraced with open arms.
Now, if Donald Trump genuinely cared about the treatment of Christians abroad, he might want to bring up the treatment of Christians by Israel with his close ally Netanyahu. For example, this year, Israeli police cracked down on Palestinian Christians celebrating Christmas. The Guardian reports they even arrested a man dressed as Santa. Earlier this year, NPR reported witnesses saying that Israeli settlers lit fire to homes in a Christian village in the occupied West Bank. In July, an Israeli strike hit the only Catholic church in Gaza, killing 3, including a priest. And then in Bethlehem, the birthplace of Christianity, public celebrations took place for the first time in 3 years. Now, Trump's actions and his allies beg the question, does he really care about Christians abroad? And how does he square military strikes with his claim that he ended 8 wars? This is how he talked about it just yesterday. Listen.
Thousands, tens of thousands of Christians, and I told Nigeria and I told the people around Nigeria that if you do it, you're going to get hit. And I said yesterday, I said, hit them on Christmas Day. It'll be a Christmas present. We hit ISIS, who are terrible. They're butchers. And we really hit them hard in different locations, and they really got hit hard yesterday. So they got a very bad Christmas present. We ended 8 wars, and I have 1 more to go. And that one I thought would have been an easy one because I do get along well with them. But has not turned out to be the easiest, has turned out to be the toughest.
We just got some breaking news that you're having Zelensky at Mar-a-Lago on Sunday, and I said, I mean, you work 7 days a week. I mean, you including Christmas.
I work about the same hours as you do, which is all the time. I don't know. We'll have a contest for who works longer hours and who works harder, and then we'll also have a contest for who works smarter.
All right, joining us now, Yinka Adegoke, Africa editor at Semaphore, and Bobby Ghosh, columnist and geopolitical analyst. Great to have both of you with us. So a lot of foreign policy this week at a time of year usually when it's quite quiet. I want to start with what has happened in Nigeria because a lot of people are calling out a bit of irony on Donald Trump's part and also hearing from Nigerians who've been saying, yes, insecurity is a problem, but the way that it is being framed in Donald Trump's narrative that this is somehow exclusively an attack on Christians or a genocide against Christians in Nigeria is not correct. Give us the reading of what is happening in Nigeria. What do you make of these strikes against ISIS in northern Nigeria?
Well, you get the sense that we're at this point again where Donald Trump says a really sort of callous thing about giving a Christmas present to Christians in Nigeria. And you really feel that it's not about the Christians in Nigeria, it's really about the Christians, or the evangelical Christians in the United States, right? They're more concerned about, sort of making them believe, we're looking after Christians around the world. But actually, the problems in Nigeria, as you rightly point out, are just a real problem of insecurity across the north of the country, which frankly predominantly affects Muslims because the north of Nigeria is predominantly Muslim, right? So it's not about Christians specifically, even though many Christians have been killed. Let's be very clear about this. Many Christians have been killed, and churches have been attacked, but then so have mosques, right? So it's not some sort of issue of terrorists going after Christians. It's about insecurity, poverty, demographics, all those things we know lead to people, resorting to these types of actions. And, these bomb strikes might temporarily, reduce some of the problems, but frankly, it's not going to be a long-term solution in any kind of way, because it's not addressing the real underlying issues that you have in Nigeria.
And Bobby, if we take Trump at his word, this administration at their word, that they are concerned about Christians in Nigeria, why then are they not offering them some kind of fast-tracked asylum here in the United States, the way that they have offered to white South Africans?
I think we could take a quite easy guess as to why not. Look, that's exactly the point. You're the same administration that has essentially denied all Nigerians, Christians and Muslims alike, access to the United States. USAID cut off, which affects both communities. The same administration that is cracking down on Christians in this country. So many of the excesses we are seeing with ICE and with the immigration forces targeting Christians. Iranian Christians were being sent back to Iran, where they're going to be persecuted. If you're worried about Christians being persecuted, you don't send a Christian back to a country where you can pretty much take it for granted they're going to be persecuted. So you started by saying if we take this administration at its word. I'm afraid we can't. There's just no way that this stacks up to any kind of logic. This very much reminds me of Bill Clinton shooting off cruise missiles into Afghanistan. This is long before 9/11, after the embassy bombings in Africa. You remember, you shot off a few missiles. There was a crisis here at home that needed people to be distracted from. I think we're seeing a repeat of that. You're sending off a few missiles, cost a few $1 million, which is a rounding error for the American military budget. Is it going to make any difference? I would be really, really surprised.
What seems very different to me now is that Trump's base thinks he's spending too much of his energy and time and resources abroad. Back then, having some saber rattling and some pyrotechnics abroad may have been a distraction that the American audience was interested in or was eating up or whatever in a gory way. But today, the MAGA base is already in civil war, in part over America First and whether we should be engaging more with the outside world, and indeed whether we should be providing arms or deploying arms to the outside world. So I'm just wondering, Yinka, how you read this continued, persistent effort from Donald Trump to basically be interested in starting more wars or otherwise getting our military involved in other parts of the world.
There are a few ways you can look at this. One of the first is the word you use there, distraction. You've got the Epstein files and so many other things going on over here. This is a good distraction. It makes America, look strong, perhaps. But also, it's also just about a situation where they're not worried about, Christians or Muslims. They're just interested in projecting a kind of false strength and a distraction for the MAGA base, which, kind of makes them feel like it's really about exporting, if you like, America's culture wars, right? Something that, we talked earlier about South Africans, and here we're going to take care of white Christians wherever they are, and we'll also look after some African Christians, because that's, that makes us also not look terrible. We're taking care of Christians everywhere. Because remember, the Christian rights have been pushing this story about Nigeria for a few years now, and finally it got to Donald Trump's ears, and we had the situation that we have now.
I think that's exactly right. And if I can add, the Christian right's also been involved in Africa for a very long time, evangelizing, anti-gay rhetoric and having a direct impact on African countries, changing their laws to make them more intolerant of gays and the LGBT community. There are large sections of the MAGA base that do care about Africa in very particular ways. So it's not like it won't come as a big surprise to a lot of people in that Trump universe.
But to do it on Christmas Day, it's not like he gets that much net political benefit. It goes back to what I'm saying, like he really just needs to engage with his family instead of firing off 16 tomahawks. But to go back to what's coming soon, tomorrow Volodymyr Zelensky is going to go to Mar-a-Lago, meet with President Trump. There's all this shuttle diplomacy going on where you have the Russians come to Miami to meet with Steve Witkoff and with Jared Kushner now, and a Ukrainian delegation coming. But Trump has really almost boxed himself out of this process. Does he actually have any juice when it comes to negotiating this settlement, since he has pushed so much of the responsibility on the Europeans, and he's made it pretty clear that he doesn't stand with the Ukrainians getting that fair of a deal?
Well, I think it gives him a way out, right? It allows him to say, I think it's a recognition on his part that this is an intractable problem, will not be solved as easily as he thought it might be. It's clear which side he wants to win this particular argument, if that's the way to put it. But he realizes that this is very, very complicated and will not easily be solved. So when that happens, he withdraws, and other people take responsibility. And if it doesn't work out, other people get blamed. Right? That's been his playbook throughout his career, and certainly since he got into politics. Just figure out if there is an easy win, if there's low-hanging fruit, then you grab it. If there's not, you withdraw and say, let other people. And I tried my best, and it's these other people, they just weren't as competent as I would.
If it requires a strategy.
Speaking of that, as we head into a midterm year, President Trump predicts the 2026 midterm elections will center around pricing, with the balance of power in Congress on the line.
Madeline Rivera joining us live from Washington with the details. Good morning, Madeline.
Good morning. President Trump's message heading into next year is that they're fixing the inflation they inherited under the Biden administration and that Americans will start to feel their economic policies. The president saying, I think it's going to be about the success of our country. It'll be about pricing. They gave us high pricing and we're bringing it down. Energy's way down. Gasoline is way down. That's what he said to Politico. The White House is feeling a boost after some positive economic indicators. The U.S. economy grew at a rate of 4.3% in the third quarter of the year, driven mainly by consumer spending, exports, and government spending. Inflation cooled to an annual rate of 2.7% in November, and the average gas price is $2.85 per gallon. The president crediting his tariffs while also highlighting the data, saying on Truth Social, tariffs are creating great wealth and unprecedented national security for the USA. Trade deficit has been cut by 60%, totally unheard of. 4.3% GDP and going way up. No inflation. We are respected as a country again. All of this has Republicans feeling bullish that they can gain the upper hand on affordability. Democrats have been on the offensive on the issue, riding a wave of victories at the ballot box this year after placing the cost of living front and center. But a Fox News poll shows 72% rate the economy negatively, 72% of voters at that. A lot of that negative sentiment is driven by 9 in 10 Democrats and independents giving the economy bad marks. Nearly half of Republicans feel the same. Charlie, Lisa, and Griff.
Thanks, Maddie.
Thanks, Maddie. Well, certainly, without a doubt, the issue of affordability and pricing is going to be a huge issue in the coming election. And, one of the things that Charlie Kirk often talked about was the incredible cost of getting onto that first rung of the ladder, which is buying your first home. And the average age of a first-time home buyer in 1981 was 29 years old. Today, it is 40 years old. And, we can argue about a lot of different things, but when you look at a statistic like that, it's a shocking statistic. And the question is, what are politicians going to do how are they going to solve this problem? Obviously, one of the biggest things that affects this is national debt. When the cost of debt, when you rack up $40 trillion in debt, capital becomes much more expensive. It becomes much more, companies wind up investing in homes, which raises the price of those homes. All kinds of bad things like that. But one of the things that I think is really dangerous is when you have political leaders lecturing young people about being wiser with their money and blaming young people for the cost of houses today, when this is the same generation of leaders who gave us $40 trillion in debt. It makes it really, really difficult for young people. And I think the future of politics is figuring out this problem and convincing those young people that they can still get onto the first rung of the American dream.
Yeah, and look, to be fair to young people, you can't blame them. If you go back just a couple of years ago, when inflation under President Joe Biden was 9%,
yeah,
you can't blame young people for feeling that life altogether is just unaffordable. Not just housing, everything. But look at, this is what the Trump administration is saying. Look at some of the major milestones that they are starting to turn that tide in the right direction. The 4.3% GDP growth is a big one. That blew away expectations, and that is why people at the Wall Street Journal, like James Freeman, say that the really resurgence of the economy is the most underreported story of the year. But you do see in the numbers we've got up there, the 30-year fixed mortgage rate has come down a little bit. Overall inflation at 2.7%. Gas prices, by the way, you see there, cheaper than it was a year ago, 2.82. On Friday, we were talking a little bit about this, and I had a friend in New Caney, Texas, texted me when we were talking about it, said, hey, I just filled my car up in New Caney, Texas at Walmart, $2.07. So depending on where you are in the country, you certainly are feeling it. Shelter inflation down from over 4% this time last year to 3%. And it's fascinating because you do have, if you look state by state, states like California, which has the highest of the inflation, the hardest places for young people to buy homes. I'm excited that we have HUD Secretary Scott Turner on today because we've heard so much about the administration soon to lay out their plan to make it affordable for young people to get into that first rung, as Charlie pointed out. And we don't know exactly what it's going to look like, but the numbers are starting to turn in their favor. You hear people like Kevin Hassett, Howard Lutnick saying that things are looking good now, but it's next year that things are really going to go well when they have the tax cuts, when they have more deregulation.
Yeah, and every election comes down to that infamous James Carville quote, it's the economy is stupid. Yeah. This election cycle, it's affordability stupid, right? So it's the same thing, just framed in a different manner. And you see those numbers that Griff just laid out, a lot of positive movement for Republicans heading in the midterms. So if that continues to bear out and come to fruition ahead of the midterms, that will set Republicans up nicely as well. And you get to the issue of home buyership. I will say I'm 40 still very, very young. But yeah, we want that number to be earlier in life, but people are also getting married later as well. And I think home ownership's one of those things you tend to do more as a married couple, right? Like it sort of signifies the growth of a family and developing a family as well. You also have a lot of young people saddled with student loan debt, and that is a big barrier to home ownership as well. We're going to have the HUD secretary coming up here. He also penned an op-ed for Fox News, and another thing that he had listed, which is important, is how immigration and illegal aliens have impacted the housing market as well. He writes about how foreign-born migrants accounted for 2/3 of growth in rental demand across the country. Some places such as California and New York saw 100% growth in migrant-fueled rental demand. So that's another question that we'll have for him as well. So a lot of big issues. Obviously, the Trump administration trying to address this wants to make the economy stronger for all Americans, including younger people.
And of course, if we're going to be
and
talking...
40, which is still young, too.
Yeah, 40 is very young, extremely young.
Want even more Fox News on YouTube? Become a Fox News Patriot today. Click join to find out how.
This week, Secretary of State Marco Rubio barred several people closely associated with the European censorship efforts from traveling to the United States. In a post on X, Rubio accused these leaders of pressuring U.S. tech platforms over content moderation, writing in part, the Trump administration will no longer tolerate these egregious acts of extraterritorial censorship. Jonathan Turley is writing about this. He's a Fox News contributor and a George Washington University law professor and joins us now. So great to see you this morning, Professor. You've always been a clarion voice on this issue. And I think it's always important to start every one of these conversations reminding people that what we're talking about here with these censorship issues, efforts, is a government seeking to deploy government-approved speech.
That's right. And, Secretary Rubio, Vice President Vance, President Trump have been outstanding. This is the first administration that is finally joining this fight and saying that they are not going to be passive as the EU establishes standards for free speech for Americans and American companies. In my forthcoming book, The Rage and the Republic, I talk about challenges to the American democracy in the 21st century. One of the greatest challenges is this global governance system, and specifically the EU. That is, the EU is exporting these standards. It's saying that it can censor Americans and American companies according to their own standards. Some anti-free speech figures like Hillary Clinton went to the Europeans when Musk bought X and said, you forced them to restore censorship. There have been Americans that have been over in Europe encouraging this. And one of the 5 individuals that has been sanctioned is talked about in my book. And Thierry Breton is an infamous figure. He was one of the key figures in creating this EU censorship system. And Charlie, the thing that I warn about in the book is that the EU is an incrementalist institution. They've always understood that people would cling to their national identity. But many people in the EU view nationalism as a dangerous relic. Right. And so throughout its history, it has moved slowly to get people to yield more and more of their national identity and national laws. This is an existential fight for the United States.
So if you're an American citizen and you have a Facebook page and you have written fiery posts about the government during COVID, or say about gun rights or something like that, should you be concerned about traveling to the EU?
You should be concerned primarily about what your carriers are going to do, what these companies are going to have to do. Because what the EU is telling X, Facebook, is that we will hit you with billion-dollar fines until you restore the censorship that existed in previous administrations. This guy, Breton, threatened Musk. When Musk announced that he was simply going to interview Trump when he was running for the presidency, he threatened him and said, the EU is monitoring you, and we may sanction you depending on what happens in that interview. That was an interview with the future re-elected president of the United States, where the EU was saying, we don't approve. On top of that, the EU has said that companies have to be subject to their environmental and other standards, or they could be challenged in the EU. Where an American company that doesn't follow their what's called ESG standards could also be sanctioned. So it's not just free speech. That's why people have got to wake up, and specifically Congress has need to see this for what it is, this existential threat to our sovereignty.
Well, tyranny often changes uniforms, but it always looks the same. Professor Turley, thank you so much for your leadership and clarity on this issue.
I'm Steve Doocy. I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.
What's ahead in 2026? It's time to check in with some of our exhausted Washington beat reporters, including Chief Washington Correspondent Major Garrett, who also hosts The Takeout on our 24/7 digital network, Chief Washington Analyst Robert Costa, Justice Correspondent Scott McFarland, Chief Legal Correspondent Jan Crawford, and Senior White House Reporter Jennifer Jacobs. It's great to have you all here.
Exhausted, but also energized. You know, we've got to keep the energy going.
No, keep the coffee coming, Major. We're going to need it for the year ahead. But we looked at the polling, Costa. I want to get your take on this, because a majority of Americans disapprove of the president's signature policy issue, immigration, came in at 54%. His approval of his handling of the economy, which is his other signature issue he was elected on, is now at 37%, according to our latest CBS poll. How frustrated is the president frustrated with the perception of his first year?
Margaret, the Democrats are looking at those numbers, and that's why they're making their whole argument to the country, both in the 2025 elections and ahead of 2026, all about that one word, affordability. They see real vulnerability for this administration on the economy. But inside the White House, I would say the phrase is not affordability, it's self-confidence. This president behind the scenes is telling his advisors to stay steady, to not have alarm. There is frustration about press coverage. There's frustration about how Republicans in Congress seem to be so worried ahead of the midterms, some heading for the exits. with retirements. But when it comes to the economy, the president, again and again in private conversations with his top officials, is insistent that the trade policy is working. He's not going to pull back on tariffs at all. He believes he can have a new start with the new Fed chairman coming in 2026. And so it's President Trump at the center driving this conversation and staving off any concern.
I want to come back to you on the departures question, but just to follow up on the specifics, Jennifer, what do your sources tell you about how the president's going to tackle specifically some of these economic issues?
Housing costs are really eating into wages, and the president has been shown polling that showed this is a really hot issue for both Democratic voters and Republican voters alike. The president has about a dozen proposals before him that have all sorts of ideas for how to lower mortgage costs, decrease rental costs, and it's everything from it's tax incentives for urban areas. It's first-time homebuyers. They're thinking about creating a new savings account that would be similar to the 529 college savings account, but this would be for first-time homebuyers. They're talking about federal lands, opening up federal lands for new housing construction. The president has been talking to home builders and members of Congress and the new mayor-elect in New York City about the housing affordability issue. He has scheduled meetings down in Florida while he's there for Christmas break to talk to his advisors about this. I'm told that the president wants the housing cost issue to be the very first big policy decision that he launches in the new year, sometime January or February.
Focusing in on that biggest contributor to inflation,
Exactly.
Shelter costs. Jan, tariffs are at the very heart of the president's agenda, and we know the court is expected to decide soon on the legality on a certain set of the president's tariffs that he justified by citing fentanyl. IEEPA is the clunky term. Should the White House be so confident that they're going to win?
Well, I mean, I certainly didn't get that impression from the argument. I mean, the Chief Justice, Justice Gorsuch, solid conservatives were asking questions really skeptical of the administration's arguments on tariffs. It was kind of a tale of two arguments, though, because as that case kind of progressed, then they started asking questions skeptical of the other side. So, I mean, I think that anyone that comes out and confidently predicts how the court's going to rule in this case is just wishful thinking. I mean, it could be very close. I could see a 5-4 ruling, Trump losing. I could see a 6-3 decision, perhaps Trump wins. I mean, it really is one of those arguments, and you sometimes can predict based on their questions, as we've discussed many times. This was one that, no, you couldn't predict it.
It's interesting because the president's top economic advisor was arguing to us recently on Face the Nation that, because it's so complicated to try to unwind this or repay the tariffs if they are found retroactively to have been
hundreds of billions. You're
but basically,
refund them all?
the court would say it's too complicated. That's not what they're ruling on, though.
No, although there are arguments, and Justice Alito, I think kind of the vanguard of that conservative wing, had suggested through his questions that perhaps these tariffs could be justified under another law. It came up at argument. What would happen? Would they just have to refund these tariffs to the people who are specifically challenging this case, a handful of businesses, or does it have to apply to everyone? So that was a question argument, and you're right. It's not about the law, but again, the court, I think, even in this case, I'm not sure they were sure how they were going to resolve it. And it's one of the things covering the court. I kind of can't wait to see
top administration officials, Margaret, have been very confident, but now they're sort of backpedaling a little bit, saying it's going to be a nuanced ruling. They're anticipating some granularity in what the court says.
Well,
so maybe not all the things have to be refunded, and working within existing law, which is much clearer. That's not IEEPA, that clunky term. So the administration is bracing for something where they have to adjust. They don't get all that they want, but they will have gained a year's worth of conversation of reorienting the global economy, and that's what they believe is a political winner.
But there is also so much political, noise wrapped up in this. The president has promised that the tariff revenue be used for so many different things. So if you unwind them,
$2,000
or at least
checks yet
part
to
of them,
materialize, yes.
right? Which now the White House is saying, Congress is going to have to come back to us on the legalities. Actually, we're going to get to exactly that point right now, Major Garrett. Thank you for setting me up, Scott, on that point, because we're talking about the administration sort of testing the limits of executive authority. On the legal front, the president has gone after some perceived enemies in things like executive orders, announced, stripping away of security clearances, even of people who don't even currently have one, but he's made his point. But his attempt to prosecute opponents hasn't been quite as simple. What are you seeing?
He campaigned a year ago arguing he'd end the weaponization of the Department of Justice against political enemies. And what do we see in 2025? An awful lot of investigations and criminal cases against his political critics. We saw these flailing attempts to charge James Comey and Letitia James, the New York Attorney General. Those cases were dismissed, and twice in the past few weeks, grand juries have said no to efforts to try to resuscitate the case against Letitia James. Grand juries rarely say no to prosecutors. That was a profound thing. But it's not just them. We know that there's efforts underway to potentially investigate Adam Schiff, the senator from California, Eric Swalwell, the congressman from California. And I think more fundamentally, Margaret, it's not just the cases or the investigations or the calls. It's the changes inside the Department of Justice. They have purged out prosecutors who handle cases Trump doesn't like, bringing in potentially new voices that critics would say are poised to weaponize against critics.
And a tacit admission from the White House Chief of Staff that there is a retribution campaign in the article written by Vanity Fair, Chris Whipple. Susie Wiles said, yes, she was going to try to put a time limit on that, unsuccessfully, but acknowledging what Scott just said is a real thing.
Well, on this question, though, of limits to authority, Major, we've seen some limits to congressional power, or at least willingness to exert its authority. Do you think that's going to change this year?
The political contours of the Congress going into 2026 are going to really flow through how anxious are Republicans about their own ability to obtain re-election. And do they have to create some noticeable difference between themselves and the president and the Trump administration? Through all 2025, the answer to that was no. We're good. We're staying in with Trump. But if the atmosphere, which currently exists, leading to some retirements, continues to worsen, you will see more congressional pushback. Does it manifold in a way that stops Trump and the administration cold? No, but it complicates things. And if anyone leaves the cabinet, the idea of who the nominee is and what their Senate confirmation prospects are will be filtered through this.
Costa, on that point, do you see departures from the cabinet happening?
It's very possible, though President Trump is not one to just make a move immediately because there's a flurry of news, negative news about one of his cabinet members. We see he often takes his time to make some of these decisions, and he doesn't like to be pressured to get rid of anybody. But there are so many people in the so-called MAGA universe who want these slots, and they are able to get access to this president. They can call him up when he's at Mar-a-Lago or when he's in the White House residence and really put themselves out there as someone, should there be an opening, to be ready. So at this point, it's not a usual kind of movement on the cabinet front, but a lot of these cabinet officials I've spoken to privately and their top aides say they're going to try to make it through the midterm elections and then leave. But if the president is feeling pressure to make some kind of significant change ahead of the midterms, I wouldn't rule anything out based on my reporting.
I can tell you, Margaret, this is not cabinet members, but this is in the West Wing. That main pack of inner circle advisors is going to stay intact, and that includes Susie Wiles and Stephen Miller and Caroline Levitt on the way down. That core group of people, they're not going anywhere. I think we will see some senior advisors in the West Wing leave. Just keep in mind that there are some advisors that have young children, so they might be leaving for family reasons. But I was told a joke recently about this term compared to Trump's last term in terms of turnover is like Lake Placid, because even if you are pushed out of this administration, at least you get like a nice U.S. ambassadorship somewhere. So the turnover has
There's
been
a softer landing this time. More parachutes are packed this time than last time.
And why do you think that is?
I think that it's just about avoiding the appearance of indulging the media coming after the president, and the media gets a scalp.
And rewarding
that's
loyalists.
what it is. That's what it is.
Jan, there is a perception that the Supreme Court has shown limited resistance to the president's efforts to expand the powers of the executive. Do you think that's fair? And do you think on that big case that's coming with birthright citizenship that they will find in his favor?
I think there is a perception because of the way the court has handled some of these emergency requests from the Trump administration to step in to these cases and put lower court rulings on hold while the litigation plays out. So that would let the policies take effect. And the Trump administration has had tremendous success. I mean, well over 20 such requests have been granted to let some of these policies go into effect, whether it's on deportations, on immigration stops, mass firings. But those are temporary interim orders. And the administration has been very strategic and only appealing these adverse rulings from courts below that it thinks it can win. There have been well over 100 lower court orders enforced against the Trump administration and his policies, and so they've only taken up less than 30. So they're being very strategic about the ones they think they can win. They're not appealing the retribution against law firms or those kind of cases. And also, once we do get to the merits, because again, these are just interim orders, once we do get to the merits, I don't think Trump's going to win all these cases. And I certainly don't think he's going to win the birthright citizenship case.
You don't?
No, absolutely not. He may not win the tariffs case. So he may, right now it's looking great for Trump in the Supreme Court, but it may look very different come June when we've kind of gotten through some of these big landmark rulings.
And Jan Speed is going to be at the center of the 2026 politics. Tariffs, Voting Rights Act, and birthright citizenship all will have massive political consequences.
Oh, and so many social issue cases as well. Transgender participation in girls' sports. We've got 2 huge gun rights cases. This is a highly consequential term for the court. And, it's going to be in conflict, I think, with President Trump by the end of the term because he's not going to like all these rulings.
We also saw that ruling on the congressional map in Texas. There is another set of arguments about the constitutionality of Louisiana's congressional map. What's happening with that case?
That could actually be the biggest case of the term. And it's one that, again, the Trump cases are getting so much of the attention, but these other cases could actually have much more profound implications for American life and elections. That is a case that really asks the Supreme Court to limit the use of race in congressional redistricting, to say that a section of the Voting Rights Act, Section 2, really no longer should require states to sometimes draw those zigzaggy districts to group people together based on their race solely to increase minority representation. And if the court limits the use of Section 2 and that kind of redistricting, that would have a profound effect on your beat and your
Could change
jobs.
district lines in 12 to 15 districts minimally. That's more for 2028, not for 2026.
Right. But for the future, again, this is a court that's been very consistent over the past 20 years. It's not because Donald Trump's in the White House. This is a Supreme Court that for 20 years has had a pattern of conservative decisions on voting rights, on social issues, on executive power. And this could be another one.
And Casa, on that Texas decision, that was the predicate for Governor Newsom out in California going ahead with this Proposition 50 referendum. Where is this heading next, and where is he heading next?
Beyond the legal front, redistricting, one of the biggest stories of 2025 and likely to be one of the biggest stories of 2026. Proposition 50, the ballot measure in California, was successful. Democratic Governor Gavin Newsom able to help secure probably some more seats for the Democrats in the House. But you also see on the Republican side real resistance to President Trump's pressure campaign on certain states, like in Indiana, where some of these state legislators are standing up and saying, we don't want to go along with President Trump's idea and suggestion. Now, for Newsom, this could put him in a prime position ahead of the 2028 presidential race, especially if the Democrats win the House, to say, hey, I deserve some credit for what happened.
You're not predicting Democrats win the House, are you?
I'm not predicting anything, but I think the Democrats, because of Proposition 50, are in a much better position to be in the majority come early 2027. But that's why President Trump's scrambling, pushing almost all of these state legislatures to make sure he doesn't lose the House. And inside the White House, there is a bit of alarm, quiet alarm for now, that the Democrats, if they win the majority, could pursue impeachment.
Well, they have tough numbers in the Senate on that one.
Removal from office would be very difficult, but impeachment in the House, if they control the House, it's possible.
Possibly. Scott, we're talking about the midterms here. The backdrop to all of this, though, is this growing drumbeat concern about political violence. What are your law enforcement sources telling you about the year ahead?
It is a transcendent concern, and it's significantly higher as we sit here this holiday week than it was a year ago, and that's saying something. There were more than 14,000 threat investigations undertaken by U.S. Capitol Police as of this past fall for 2025. That's 5,000 more than all of 2024, which was several thousand more than a few years earlier. It's manifesting itself into the doxing, the swattings, the menacing of public officials, of people who have public policy decisions like those Indiana state legislators who got harassed before they voted not to redistrict. And the broader concern, Margaret, is if you're going to menace people before they make a public policy decision, then they make their decision, does that incentivize others to get into this world where they start issuing threats too? And how contagious does that become?
I think all of us hope for a lowering of that rhetoric and that risk. Scott, Jen, Major, Bob, Jan, always great to have you here. We'll be right back. And we're back with our panel. Predictions for 2026. Robert Costa.
My motto as a reporter is assume nothing. And we're very early in the 2028 presidential cycle and discussion. And we've discussed Governor Gavin Newsom of California. There's so many other governors out there, Governor Shapiro of Pennsylvania, Governor Pritzker of Illinois. The list goes on. But my prediction is in 2026, we're going to see some names we're not discussing at all start to emerge as possible contenders for the Democrats in 2028. Some celebrities might come into the mix. And one name I would venture, based on some recent reporting, Stephen A. Smith, the sports personality, is talking to people in the Democratic Party about whether he has a future, whether he runs or not, TBD, but something to watch. Celebrity politics in the age of Trump on both sides.
Jan Crawford.
I'm going to revisit a prediction I made last year when I kind of confidently said that Justice Alito was probably going to retire and give President Trump his fourth nomination to the Supreme Court. Sources close to Justice Alito say he has not made up his mind. He, in many ways, is too young to retire. He's 75 years old. But then there's the concern that he's too old not to, because if he cares about his legacy, and he is that intellectual leader of the conservative wing, if he cares about his legacy with a Republican in the White House, a Republican-controlled Senate, this year would be the best time for him to retire. So I'm going to call that even odds.
And Alabama football.
Roll Tide. You know I got to go. That's what I normally do, but it gets tiresome because I'm always saying Alabama's going to win the national championship.
Scott?
While she's literally wearing the Alabama school colors, she says that. I think Americans will begin or increasingly feel the effects of DOGE. There's an awful lot of people lost their jobs in the last 12 months. A lot of longtime career civil servants who were good at delivering products for the American citizens. In my world, the Department of Justice, they got rid of 5,000 people. That can't help but slow down prosecutions, investigations, and doing right by American people. And that's true across the board in Washington.
Jennifer?
Fraud investigations. I think you're going to see this administration really dig in deeper to try to find evidence that proves fraud in various government programs, people cheating the system, trying to fleece taxpayers after the situation in Minnesota, where prosecutors say that billions in dollars of fraud were found in the Medicaid program. You've got the U.S. Department of Agriculture looking into people who receive food assistance, trying to make sure that people who are getting aid to buy their groceries are not that just the names of people who are deceased or are fraudsters. The president is into this, and the administration thinks the deeper they dig, the more they find.
Major?
So I'm going to be the glue for this process because we have predictions and underreported. Mine merged together. So prediction is data centers and AI expansion will be a underappreciated but potent political issue in 2026. 8 executive orders signed by President Trump related to artificial intelligence, just behind tariffs and immigration. He has made himself the AI president. Yet, let me give you some names of states. Indiana, Arizona, Missouri, Texas, all in one way or another, on the Republican side, are up in arms about either AI regulation, lack thereof, or data centers and their implications. 60% in our most recent poll, nearly 60% of Americans believe artificial intelligence will not increase jobs, but take jobs away. And 44% in our most recent poll want more regulation of AI than less. This is a wedge issue that Democrats have identified because it is not cohered on the MAGA side. The president has already put down his chips on it, but data centers, utility rates, materials, all those things are going to be under the ground, rise up in the midterms in unexpected ways.
And we've already seen some Democrats campaign around
Absolutely.
this in Virginia and in New Jersey.
In the acceptance speeches of both Mikey Sherrill, governor of New Jersey, and Abigail Spanberger, governor of Virginia, they linked data centers and utility rates. It is an issue coming.
Okay, underreported. What did you want to report that you couldn't?
I love Scott's point. I'm going to build on it. Elon Musk and the DOGE team, they promised to cut the federal workforce. We're at the end of the year. So what is the tally for the year? It is 271,000 workers. That's according to the latest jobs report that showed how many workers the federal government shed. So just to put that into perspective, that's roughly the population of Madison, Wisconsin. So imagine if every single person in Madison, Wisconsin were to lose their job, either ousted or they leave their job. So the bottom line on DOGE is that they did not succeed in cutting overall government spending, but they did fulfill their mission to trim the federal headcount by roughly about 10%. And I think it's going to be important to track those workers and to see where they end up, what their fates are, because they are not being scooped up in the private sector, at least not yet.
There was some attention, but not the requisite attention, to the thermonuclear use of pardons in 2025. The relatively, if not completely novel use of pardons before somebody's actually gone on trial, like Congressman Henry Cuellar of Texas. A grand jury saw fit to indict him, but a jury of his peers never got to hear the case because the president pardoned Cuellar. How about the sheriff from Virginia? Pardoned before he did his appeals, as is customary, before he paid his reimbursement, as he was on his way to prison. Pardoned. Blanket pardons, family pardons, preemptive pardons. Is the next person going to bring it back to what we've enjoyed over the past couple centuries, the traditional controversies around pardons?
Well, we've heard from even some Democrats they'd like to see pardon reform and for Congress to actually legislate. But until then, these presidents kind of get to do what they want.
There's no stopping it.
Yeah. Jan, underreported?
You know, there is a narrative that the Supreme Court is corrupt. I mean, we saw that emerge in the wake of the Dobbs decision that overturned Roe versus Wade. And now we see it that they're in the tank for Trump. Not only is that narrative over-reported, it is patently false, and it is dangerous for the institution and the public's faith and confidence in the rule of law. This is a conservative Supreme Court. It has been a conservative Supreme Court for 20 years. People can disagree and do disagree with their opinions, but it's profoundly wrong to call it or say corruption where there, in fact, is none. What's underreported is any understanding of what this court's been doing for the past 20 years, its views of its role vis-a-vis the other branches, how it sees the law, how it's trying in its focus to restore some kind of accountability in our constitutional structure. Again, this is a court that is functional. It is consistent. They are 9 justices. They don't necessarily see the Constitution the same way by any means, or how to interpret federal law. They're in a struggle over the proper way to interpret the Constitution, but that is as it should be. And I think as we approach our 250th anniversary of this country, it's important to think about the court and the rule of law as the justices are doing, especially if we hope to keep democracy intact.
That's a big statement, Jan. If we hope to keep democracy intact.
If the public loses confidence in the rule of law, I don't know what that means for democracy.
Yeah.
And that's why I think some of the rhetoric about corruption is so profoundly irresponsible.
And it causes threats, which we talked about earlier.
Oh, yes, which again, I mean, the justices are under tremendous, and federal judges as well.
Well, it's all institutions, including the Fourth Estate. Bob Costa, you're underreported.
Just briefly, one of the most striking stories of the year politically, Zohran Mamdani, young.
He's underreported?
No. Let me make my point. One of the most striking stories was Mamdani's victory. The big question a lot of people have is, well, how does this happen? How does this young Democratic Socialist win in New York City? In my view, the most underreported story of the year is how someone laid the foundation for Zohran Mamdani, someone nearly 50 years older. Senator Bernie Sanders, independent Democratic Socialist of Vermont, had what's called a Fight Oligarchy tour earlier in 2025, drawing thousands of people in red states and blue states. Sanders enabled Mamdani and others like him to start to gain traction for democratic socialism inside of the democratic construct in this country in 2025. If you don't have the Fight Oligarchy tour really stirring people up on the issues that Mamdani won on, it's hard to see how Mamdani got the same kind of momentum he ended up getting in late 2025. So Senator Bernie Sanders, even though he has 2 past presidential runs that were unsuccessful, still influencing the future of American politics.
Interesting indeed. Thanks to all of you.
Thank
and
you.
good luck to us all in 2026. Chris Krebs was director of the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency during the first Trump administration. And Sam Vinograd, a former counterterrorism official at the Department of Homeland Security during the Biden administration. It's good to have you both here.
Be here.
We've heard so much in the past year about AI, artificial intelligence, in virtually every sector of the business world, in national security. you've said AI, it's not just an app on your phone. It's not just a computer chip. It's energy. It's data centers. There are some really complex challenges here. What are you looking at in the year ahead?
Well, starting exactly there, just the diversity of sectors that are impacted by AI. It is a incredibly complex global value chain. It's chips. We've heard a lot about the NVIDIA H200 chips and then competing against Huawei and China. It is software.
To China,
right?
And the debate over
Right, and there's a significant tension in the national security space on should we give China chips or should we deprive them of chips?
Mm-hmm.
And it seems for now that the side that wants to give China chips and then extract value and revenue from it, that team has won for now. But broader than that, there's software, there's infrastructure, there's data centers, there's water, there's thermal management, there is training, there's workforce. So it is not just about the app that manifests on your phone. It's the entirety of the economy.
Because it's reshaping so many sectors. Of
It's
the economy
reshaping
and
the
society.
way virtually every business operates. If you go talk to CEOs, they're talking about how they can be an AI-first company. Are they happy with the results that they're seeing right now? Absolutely not.
Mm-hmm.
But they know 2 years, we're going to face this equivalent of a Cambrian explosion of AI capabilities across the economy.
And Margaret, if I can just add, it's not just reshaping how businesses operate, it's also reshaping how governments operate. If you look at AI, nothing is zero-sum in national security. It's not a net positive or a net negative. AI, and I've seen this firsthand, is changing the way that investigations are performed. It allows law enforcement officials to comb through so much data and to do investigations more efficiently. It is allowing the U.S. military to use certain autonomous vehicles and weapons that can reduce civilian risk if managed appropriately and more effectively engage in warfighting. It's changing the way the intelligence community is able to both collect and review data. At the same time, it is opening up a whole new host of threats. AI doesn't just level the playing field for certain actors, it actually brings new players onto the pitch because individuals, non-state actors have access to relatively low-cost technology that makes different kinds of threats more credible and more effective.
You said something that was a little frightening to me. You said as technology gets more advanced, the ability to anonymously hurt people exponentially increases. What does that mean on the Homeland Security front?
AI gives actors, not just in the homeland, but literally all around the world, to very credibly pretend to be somebody else. It is upending the whole notion of what identity is in today's day and age. AI is allowing bad actors to very authentically and credibly pretend to be someone else, both with their voices, with their faces, and then to deliver threats in a way that actually resonates. So it's impersonating someone, but then also using AI to figure out where vulnerabilities are in a system and what a target audience or a target entity is going to respond to.
So I want both of you to weigh in on this, but Chris, we heard just last month the first documented case of a fully automated cyber attack by a foreign government. This was the AI chatbot Claude. They said the suspected Chinese hackers had used their AI to breach about 30 global organizations, just to do it really quickly and efficiently, as I understand it. So whose job is it to protect against it? Is it the government's job, or is it a private corporation to figure out how to protect against all these risks you laid out?
Well, I think there are two things in play right now. One is, what's the regulatory environment look like that requires the safe use of these platforms? And we've seen a pullback on the regulatory front from this administration. The Biden administration had an AI executive order that required certain notifications and safety testings. That's been pulled back. Instead, we're in this innovation first model. And
that was
so
light touch. This is no touch, you're saying.
This is, yes. Again, this is really putting the full weight of the government behind the U.S. technology industry winning the global AI race. That is the top priority. And so what's happening in the meantime is you'd normally say, okay, the states are going to regulate. But now you have the White House weighing in saying states cannot regulate in the AI space. And again, CEOs want some guidance. They want governance, so they have to do it themselves.
So switching gears for a moment here, we're looking at 2026, a huge number of mass gatherings in the United States. You've got FIFA World Cup, the Super Bowl, the nation's 250th anniversary. Are you concerned about Homeland Security in the new year?
There are always a lot of threats facing the homeland. What is materially different in the coming year, in 2026, is that there are structural issues that I fear make us more vulnerable to successful attack. That includes the fact that the United States, probably for the first time in our history, is no longer viewed globally as the leader and poster child for rules-based international order. Other actors feel like they don't have to follow the rules if we're not going to. That could introduce new threats. At the same time, there has been a degradation in the systems of government that do identify threats and then work to prevent them, not just today, but over the medium and longer term.
We're going to take a quick break here, come back on the other side of it. More things to worry about in the new year in just a minute. Stay with us. And we're back with Samantha Vinograd and Chris Krebs, both are CBS contributors. Sam, you worked in Homeland Security under the Biden administration, and we heard at that time that the administration was just hamstrung unless Congress did something on the immigration front. This administration is taking a completely different approach. I mean, let's just look at what they did this year. Mass deportation campaign, significant changes to legal immigration. Border crossings are now at the lowest level in decades, secured major funding for ICE and CBP, 500,000 arrests conducted. They repealed protected status for many immigrants, and now there's a travel ban or restrictions on about 39 countries total. What is the longer-term impact of these kind of really massive changes?
Well, to be clear, the Biden administration did take action in July of 2024 to try to curtail unlawful immigration. December 2023, we saw almost 250,000 individuals unlawfully crossing our border. By January 2025, that was down about 85% before Biden left office as a result of his executive order. We are seeing, and will likely continue to see, a systemic dismemberment of lawful immigration pathways to the United States. And the administration has shared a variety of reasons for that. Failure for refugees, for example, to assimilate into the United States, security concerns, and other matters. But if you just look at the numbers, immigrants today account for over 15% of the U.S. labor force. Millions of people in this country are immigrants. And if we look at the economic impact of removing that talent, removing those people from this country, there will certainly be an economic impact, as well as, I do believe, a technological and innovative impact. As we look at the individuals coming here on student visas, on H-1B visas, and more, they are direct contributors to innovation in this country. And I fear that we risk losing out on that and getting the balance wrong between security, economic growth, and innovation.
But on that point, Chris, what the administration says you can financially sort of arrange for more H-1B visas. These are the highly skilled workers. Are we losing a competitive edge because of these restrictions?
I think this has been in play for several years, in fact, and going back even several administrations. What the Chinese, for instance, have figured out is that if they put their own capital into their Silicon Valley equivalent, they can retain high Chinese talent that has typically gone to the U.S., gone to university in the U.S., and then stayed here because our venture capital space is booming. The Chinese have figured it out. And what we're seeing now, back to the risks piece, is that the Chinese are using their financial resources to pull highly advanced, highly capable engineers out of the U.S. and European workforce, bring them back, and then copy much of the technology that's giving us the edge.
So there is a connection here back to immigration policy changes, too.
Absolutely.
Sam, I want to ask you about another big event that's coming, the midterm races. We have seen a lot of political violence or concern about political violence in months past. The assassination of Charlie Kirk, the murder of a Minnesota lawmaker and her husband. We saw Governor Shapiro's Pennsylvania residence burnt. These are just some of the high-profile things. There's more that's happened. What do you anticipate? Should we be fearful of a political environment and elections?
Politically motivated violence is probably the threat that keeps me up the most at night, particularly as we look at the year ahead. Undoubtedly, the United States is viewed as one of the largest sources of conflict and homes of conflict in the world today, which is a seismic change if you think about it. Heading into the midterms, and of course, looking ahead to the presidential, we have already seen terrorism becoming a tool of choice in the homeland to settle both personal grievances and political vendettas. The reasons for that are, of course, enhanced rhetoric, but also, frankly, enhanced access to like-minded individuals, enhanced access to tactics and techniques online, the ability to find out where your target is going to be and when, and more. The rhetoric needs to be calmed down, but there also needs to be the right investments in critical infrastructure protection and in appropriately identifying foreign influence to try to stoke up political violence and other threats.
And there have been actual cutbacks in the things you just laid out as necessary tools in terms of the FBI, their task force on foreign influence operations. Chris, the agency you used to work for, CISA, it's seen not just budget cuts, but just open jobs here. Right. What is going on? Why not build up protection going into an environment like this?
It's just not a priority right now for this administration. I think they believe that there were missteps in the past on what the Biden administration, even the first Trump administration did on identifying and countering information operations, particularly as they relate to elections. But we know that these threats are real. We know these risks are real. And we also know that they're multiplying. Sam talked earlier about the exponential explosion of capabilities in the hands of bad actors and the explosion of bad actors themselves because of tools like AI. When I think about the 26 midterms, we are going to be 2 to 3 generations beyond what the current AI model capabilities are. So they're only going to be more sophisticated, more advanced, more capabilities in the hands of those foreign and domestic that want to disrupt our ability to choose who represents us in Congress.
Thank you very much, both, for sharing your expertise with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be right back.